The polar bear, the world's largest land predator, is under threat. As the Arctic warms, the icy habitat of the bear is melting faster, leaving them hungry and vulnerable. Their population is dwindling as they struggle to survive the longer summers. And now, starving bears are coming into towns searching for food. I've come to their world to find out how they're coping in a fast-changing climate. Can they survive and adapt, or will the mighty polar bear become a climate casualty? I'm heading to Canada's far north, to the timberline, where trees give way to Arctic tundra, and the view of the northern lights is at its most spectacular. I'm landing in Churchill, Manitoba, the polar bear capital of the world. It's summertime here, and Arctic fox and snow geese can be seen in the rugged wilderness that's all around. Right off the coast, hundreds of beluga whales are gathering to feed and give birth to their young.
I'm surrounded by beluga whales here. Wow, very, very close to the kayak. Belugas and polar bears share the same habitat. This is Hudson Bay, and for half the year, it's the ice-covered hunting ground of the polar bear. The polar bear, of course, is the Ursus maritimus, the marine bear, and they're very comfortable in the water.
But this time of year, they're pretty much landbound, wandering the coastline in a state of semi-hibernation. They forage for what little food they can find while they wait for Hudson Bay to freeze over in the winter. Then they can return to their preferred habitat, the sea ice, and start hunting for seals again. But temperatures are rising worldwide, so their habitat is changing, which puts their future at risk.
The Arctic regions are warming at twice the rate of the global average. Some scientists say that we could be losing 4% of our sea ice every 10 years. That could have a devastating effect on the polar bear populations.
There are an estimated 25,000 polar bears in the world, and they depend on sea ice for survival.
They're the most majestic animal in the Arctic, and they've evolved over a long period of time from grizzly bears to take advantage of the special and unique habitat of sea ice.
It's a rich hunting ground for the bears.
They almost exclusively hunt ring seals on sea ice in the winter. That's their primary source of energy. And so the sea ice becomes a very important part of the habitat of the polar bear.
But now, with warmer air temperatures, the ice has been thawing earlier and freezing later in the waters around Hudson Bay. Less ice for less time means the bears are trapped on land for longer without access to the high-fat food they need. I want to find out more about how bears survive during these increasingly long summer months, so I'm joining up with Matthias Breiter, a biologist and expert in polar bear behavior. We've come 250 miles south to a favorite resting spot for southern polar bears. Matthias has been working with the polar bears here for 20 years and will try to get me as close as is safely possible to observe the bears without stressing them.
All right, for our bear excursions, we've got this crazy machine. 8-wheel drive, will go anywhere, over anything. You'll notice there is no sides. There's no protection, really.
A bear standing up is 10, 11 feet. He's somewhere up there.
Yeah.
Perfect chewing height.
Perfect chewing height.
We head out. The bears that are in this area are part of the western Hudson Bay population, made up of about 1,000 bears. Their habitat covers around 1,000 square miles. It's not long before a bear comes into view.
We've spotted a bear. It's over by the river. It's moving this way, so we're going to go out ahead of the bear, turn off the vehicles, get out on the ground. Hopefully, the bear will come to us. So how far will they go inland?
Juvenile males, 300 kilometers easily. Males, when they reach sexual maturity, they look for new places. When you're young, you test a lot of things, and mostly you screw up. But occasionally, you get lucky.
That sounds like my teenage years. Now, one of your specialties is getting up close to bears in the wild on foot. Some people think you're crazy. They are the largest land carnivore on Earth.
The thing is that people generally are interpreting curiosity as aggression. And then if you behave wrong, you can actually turn a purely curious approach into a very dangerous encounter.
With the bear in sight, we make our way towards it on foot.
It's on the move.
We need to play it safe for our sake, but also we don't want to disturb the bear.
Matthias, do you think it's male or female?
I think it's a male, probably 800-pound bear.
As well as observing them, I want to see what the bears are feeding on during these extended warmer months to get a sense of how the loss of sea ice is affecting their health.
Polar bears spend about 4 months living on land. So while they're here, we want to see what types of food they're ingesting. And the best way is to A, observe them eating, but B, examine their scat. And we can actually see what kind of nutrients they're getting, what food they're eating.
I'll be taking my samples to the lab at the Winnipeg Zoo for further analysis.
As we collect more and more scat, we'll have a better sense what bears have been eating. So what are they eating in the summer? There's been lots of talk about kind of switching to alternative and terrestrial food sources. So how big a role does that play? What's going into those scats? What's supporting those different bears?
We know they eat grass in the summer, but with the warm months getting longer and longer, will this diet be enough for them to survive on? Gathering samples will help us find out.
Right now, the bear is just curious, sitting on the sand.
Now he's gonna poop.
It's pooping. Fresh bear poop, yes. Of course, we have to get to it. Doesn't seem to be too interested in us, so we're gonna try and get up close to where we saw it drop that scat, so.
Isn't that nice poop there?
And the bear decided to stop. The bear is quite close, but as long as we don't do anything to alarm him, he should be okay. Just in case, I've got my bear banger here. Shoots off a flare. Hopefully, won't need it.
This bear is too close for us to safely collect the sample right now, and it looks like it's got no plans on leaving anytime soon.
There's no reason to run off. Running off takes a lot of energy. You don't want to stress them. They don't have energy to waste at this time of the year.
We decide to wait it out.
So the whole life of a polar bear is totally retention of energy.
What's the lean times for them right now?
They're very lean time.
They need to conserve their energy because, for the most part, they're living off their own fat reserves stored up from last season's hunt.
Should I be worried that I have a seal blubber energy bar in my pocket right now?
Well, I'm 100% convinced you have anything, seal blubber, anything, this bear would be run over here.
It's like ringing the dinner bell.
As their fat reserves run low, the question now becomes, can the Hudson Bay polar bear adapt to survive? These scat samples will provide invaluable information, but this bear isn't making it easy.
He's just hanging out. One thing I can do is mark this location on my GPS, and we could always come back and grab the sample. Sometimes we have limited options. So I'll just give this point a name, location. Okay, bear poop 01.
We move on to look for more bears. We spot two near the vehicles.
They both look very big, healthy.
They look healthy.
It's early in the season, so they would have just come off the ice not that long ago, so they probably still have a belly full of...
They have probably been feeding reasonably well until about a month ago. Now they lose 2 pounds a day in weight. We can try to get ahead, but if he keeps on following her, they'll just...
Yeah, I think they're gone.
We go east.
Slow down, slow down.
Look at those claw marks. That's so big.
They cannot retract their claws.
No, they cannot.
They're permanent. They're always out. Very cool. Let's follow them.
All right.
We follow the tracks and are led to a big male polar bear.
Oh, here he goes.
There he gets
He's
up.
getting up.
But this encounter soon gets a little too close for comfort.
Okay.
Hey, Doug.
I'm in northern Canada, in polar bear country. I need to collect scat samples to gauge the impact of climate change on the bear's diet. But if I disturb this one, I could be in trouble.
Matthias, do you think it's male or female?
A large male in its prime.
We watch the bear as it rests for more than an hour.
He seems a little more active now than he was a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
That's 3 yawns now.
Can be slightly nervous yawn. That can mean that he is going to get up and approach us a bit.
So what do we do if he does get up and start approaching us?
We'll do a few steps towards him. If we back up, he'll just come faster.
Right. Polar bears can run quickly, up to about 40 kilometers per hour, but only in short bursts. So if that bear really wanted to run, It could be here in the blink of an eye.
I want him to relax back down. And there he gets
He's
up.
getting up.
This 900-pound bear is a ferocious predator. It's nerve-wracking being this close.
A little bit of displacement behavior.
So he's just chewing on the grass right now.
It's like if there's something you want to do, but you don't really dare. And so you jump to another behavior.
He was just sort of thinking about us.
He's hesitating. You don't want to create fear. Fear can result in aggression.
Now he's lying back down. So if I were to suddenly start running away from him.
In all likelihood, he'll run after you.
You think so, huh?
95%.
Really? Oh, here he goes.
Okay. If he gets off the grass, we have to make a step towards him.
Walking towards a polar bear goes against every instinct.
Come on. No.
If we're wrong, we could be killed.
He'll try to come again.
So just look big.
Yeah, when he tries to hook in, I make a little step towards him. You kind of want to keep the pressure a little bit on him. Now he tries to hook again a little bit, I put a little pressure on him.
That's amazing.
You want to be dominant. Any kind of movement towards another bear is always dominance behavior. I'm steering him away. And now he's made up his mind.
He's gone.
He's gone, without creating stress.
My heart was racing. You've done this hundreds of times before, but I've never actively moved towards a polar bear that is coming towards me.
And the male one.
A big male, yeah.
I mean, if you understand a little bit how bears interact with other bears, they're reasonably predictable. People just do not read their language right.
With that crisis averted, we go back to collect the first scat sample. It's not just the bears of Hudson Bay that are seeing deteriorating ice conditions. It's a problem all over the Arctic. The minimum sea ice recorded in 2015 was 1.7 million square miles, about 40% less than the previous 30-year average.
The global temperature that we've seen of the planet, the rise of global temperature, is about 0.7 degrees Celsius. In the Arctic, it's about 2.5 to 3 times that. And the reason for that is when you cover that surface with this white sea ice, you're reflecting all that energy from the sun back to space, so it keeps it cool. Open it up, that energy goes into the surface of the ocean and it warms things up. That's a big change.
The loss of sea ice would cause a major break in the chain of life in the Arctic. Sea ice is an integral part of the Arctic food web, providing habitat for microorganisms like ice algae and zooplankton. Algae attaches to the bottom of the ice and becomes food for fish and marine mammals. Those fish sustain seals, and seals sustain polar bears. Polar bears are at the top of the food chain, but scientists are predicting that the Hudson Bay population could disappear by 2050. For now, I have the opportunity to observe them up close.
It's the one spot in the world where you can see polar bears in the wild, not on the ice, so it's a really unique spot.
The bear we tracked this morning moves on, so we can safely collect the sample.
Here's the scat.
Was able to get the sample and out of there perfectly safely without disturbing the bear, really. Specimen bag.
Until they get it to the zoo lab.
Perfect.
What we find in these samples could provide vital clues to help determine the bear's chance of survival. But getting this close to the bears is dangerous work.
So she's coming right towards us.
The polar bear has been broken down into 19 different regions that scientists recognize. And of those 19, 10 of them are here in Canada. So it's an excellent place to study polar bears and how climate change is affecting their population.
And it's the bears here in western Hudson Bay that are the most at risk of extinction. Their southerly location means they're bearing the brunt of the effects of climate change. Their numbers have declined by 22% since the early 1980s.
Over the last 30 years, the amount of time that open water season is in Hudson Bay is now about 4 weeks longer than it used to be. And there was some very dramatic observations of bears in very critical condition because they've had to fast for so long. They're not getting enough energy, and so that creates problems with mortality.
In a few weeks' time, temperatures will drop and the ice will start to form on the bay. Hundreds of hungry bears will converge along the shores close to the town of Churchill in anticipation of the coming ice. And for Churchill's Polar Bear Alert program, that's a problem.
So the longer it takes for the ice to form on the bay, the busier we are. Oftentimes you'll drive along this road and there'll be a bear just right there.
Brett Willock is taking me on one of his bear patrols. He's covering a 3-mile perimeter around Churchill, making sure hungry bears don't make it into town.
The one last night, it was about 5:30 in the morning where our staff was called and they chased it away.
Hundreds of bears gather on the coast, but it's usually the more desperate bears and juveniles that come into town to scavenge for food, bringing them dangerously close to people.
When was the last time that someone was actually attacked by a bear and injured?
2 years ago.
It can be a terrifying experience. Locals carry arms and avoid walking alone at night. In the most recent attack, 2 people were severely injured by a polar bear in the early hours of the morning.
And when you're built right on the coast of the Hudson Bay, it happened.
Most bears are coaxed away before they make it into town, but some become problem bears, and Brett and his team have to trap and relocate them. He shows me one of his traps.
Right now we're only using the one.
And how many bears do you trap per year, approximately?
It depends on how many bears are around.
Yeah.
It could be 30 bears, it could be 70 bears.
Trapped bears are taken to the holding facility, weighed, tagged, and then relocated. Many are malnourished. Locating high-energy food is key to the survival of the polar bear. The lack of sea ice is forcing some bears to migrate north to colder regions with better ice conditions. Recent DNA evidence found genes of the southern bear in the high Arctic.
We can probably expect to see either loss or much lower numbers of polar bears in places like Manitoba, and then maybe higher densities of polar bears in Grise Fiord or places that are really in the high Arctic.
But if polar bears can find new food sources, there may be hope for the population here. We head back out along the coast to see more bears and collect more samples. Not far down the beach, we encounter a sow and her cub.
The mother and cub keep wandering sort of west along the coastline.
Warmer weather for Hudson Bay has another catastrophic impact on females and their cubs. Increased spring rains can collapse their maternity dens, reproduction rates are down, and cub mortality is up for the Hudson Bay bears.
So you can see the sniffing.
Yeah.
Now she's coming right into the scent, coming right towards us. She'll never come all the way up.
No.
Their priority is to keep the cub safe. Bears are opportunists, so curiosity is exceedingly important when finding new food sources. So that is just their nature. They're curious. Always keep a look around. You never know. There could be a bear lying anywhere in the bushes and catching our scent.
And you'd never see it until,
No.
you know?
It's as far as she wanted to come.
While we observe them walking the tide line, we get lucky.
They're both pooping? Both of them pooped simultaneously. It was like a synchronized pooping.
We wait till it's safe to go in and get the sample.
Really fresh. I'll just mark this. Awesome.
On our way back, we see a polar bear finishing off what looks like the remains of a snow goose. We know that a handful of polar bears have been spotted hunting and catching caribou and eating berries as black bears do. But are they making a real transition to more land-based foods, or are these just opportunistic meals? Our next step will provide the answers. We're heading to Winnipeg to have the scat analyzed and find out if the Hudson Bay polar bears can be adapting to a swiftly warming climate. With scat samples in hand, we arrive at the lab at the zoo in Winnipeg to find out if the Hudson Bay polar bear population has a future.
Let's take a look at this.
We got a bunch.
We pull out all the samples for Dr. Peterson and log them.
Female.
We'll just have to make sure that we switch gloves between samples, just in case we're going to use these for genetic analysis.
He loads the first sample into the microscope.
There's been lots of discussion about summer food sources, bird species and stuff, so I'm always curious to see if something like that shows up
Goose
as well.
eggs.
Yeah.
He analyzes and compares each sample.
Yeah, pretty consistent. I don't know. It looks much the same as the other ones.
The grass. I don't see anything else in there. It's salad, which is totally not what you think of when you think of a bear.
Every sample we analyzed was composed of a grass called sedges. The grass gives them liquid, but no nutrients. The longer they eat grass, the more their body condition deteriorates.
So the idea that polar bears will be able to adapt to life on land without sea ice is really not practical.
No, but we're not going to see all the polar bears shift over to grazing and these other food sources in a short time period. Ultimately, polar bears need to be out on the ice getting seals, and if they're not getting to it, or they're getting to it for fewer weeks or fewer months, it's going to have big, like, population level impact.
Without the ability to adapt to new food, the future for many polar bears is looking bleak. At the current rate of climate change, even the most northerly sea ice will melt completely in the summer, and the polar bears will have nowhere left to go. For the first time, an animal at the very top of the food chain could be wiped out by climate change. It's up to everyone, individuals, companies, and countries, to continue to reduce the causes of climate change and save the polar bear.